feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Gaming review and discussion. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Well, Matt, I didn't go past PS2, so I'm here for emotional support.
If you guys, yes, today we are reviewing The Last of Us Part 1, which is the PlayStation 5 remake of the original Last of Us game, which is over, about a decade old at this point, which is wild, absolutely wild. If you guys are new listeners or new viewers, you might go, why the hell are they reviewing a video game? If you've been listening or watching for a long time, maybe you're a gamer, maybe you're not. If you clicked on this, you probably are. But I did review The Last of Us Part 2 during the pandemic, kind of early days in the pandemic. It was at that time where we're like, shit, no movies are coming out. How can we get creative? And one of the ideas I had was, well, why don't we try once in a while if it interests myself or someone else, if I bring it on a guest or maybe even Eric, or maybe it's relevant to the movie world, that we review a video game that has a great story and that is very cinematic. So, and maybe someone who's clicking on this or listening just listens to us and they're not gamers, but it might show them that these games are very cinematic and it might be something that you want to play. So that's why I reviewed The Last of Us Part 2. You can go check that out. It's on Untitled Movie Reviews, I believe, or it might be on the other show. Just search Last of Us Part 2 review, Untitled Movie Podcast, and you'll find it. And this one's going to be a little bit different. So, I have been playing The Last of Us Part 1 on PlayStation 5, game provided by PlayStation Canada. I think we do have to say that still. I was given this game for early access to play with it and kind of give my impressions of how I feel like this remake is. But how I wanted to kind of tackle this today and why Eric is here as well. He also tagged along on my Last of Us Part 2 review, even though it was just me basically blabbing for over an hour myself. Eric will be a little bit more involved today, asking questions. And we're also going to kind of use this to also talk about The Last of Us on HBO. So we did get our first teaser, sort of, for The Last of Us on HBO as part of an HBO Max, HBO sizzle reel, where they did show about 10 seconds of footage, which was a weird way to premiere footage from that show.
But you ate it up.
But I have some theories on when we will get a full trailer, which I'm sure most people who are Last of Us fans assume that it's coming up soon in late September, I think. But I wanted to use this of if you should play The Last of Us Part 1 before watching the HBO show. That's kind of how I'm tackling this review, because I think everyone knows The Last of Us, the first game, I think one of the best video games of all time, one of the best video game stories of all time, and one of the best stories I have experienced of all time. And if you've been a fan of our show or you've known me, like, you've known that I haven't shut up about The Last of Us for the last 10 years. So I have been obsessed with it. I have considered getting an Ellie tattoo, the tattoo Ellie has, not of like Ellie's face or something. That would be weird.
Just thumbs up.
But some people have that. And I've been so excited, and I've always said that it becoming an HBO show or a movie or something like that, I've always wanted that to happen, because I want to share this with people who don't play video games, like Eric or my mom or my wife, and people who just don't really consume video games. This is going to be different because, like, obviously this is both going to be a conversation for people who might be interested in playing the video game. Maybe you haven't played The Last of Us at all, and now the series is coming out and you're like, should I do it now that there's a remake coming out for PS5? Maybe you've already played The Last of Us and you played The Last of Us Part 2. And weirdly, this is technically the second remake of the original Last of Us, because it did get a remaster on PlayStation 4. So the original Last of Us came out on PlayStation 3. kind of at the end of the PlayStation 3 era, right when the PlayStation 4 was coming out. So when the PlayStation 4 came out, they did do a remaster of The Last of Us on PlayStation 4, which just kind of was the exact same game. They just improved the graphics a little bit because it could be boosted by the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. So we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of The Last of Us. It came out in 2013. Um, and Eric, I mean, jump in whenever you want, man. Like we can either start with the HBO stuff or we'll kind of give my thoughts on the game and then go into the HBO stuff. But I know you're not a gamer at all, but you have heard me talk about this fucking thing for the last 9 years.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the day when Conquer's Bad Fur Day gets the same HBO treatment. I'm hoping that's soon. Fingers
Hey,
crossed.
I'm all for that, man.
Um, I think the first question I have, just in terms of this re-release, is it something similar to what we were talking about with Dragon Ball Z Kai? Not that it's been truncated, but like some of the scenes have been re-rendered, or the animation's been updated, or is it something like where a Blu-ray will, or a movie will get another edition release based on how well it's selling, or an anniversary or a milestone coming up?
I would say it's maybe more of the latter than the former. So, or a mix of the two, because and how they've been pitching this, and I can now talk about the game fully, and I've been playing it. Like it is very familiar to me. Like I've played The Last of Us, the first game. It's a heavy game, so it's not something that you're like, I want to replay The Last of Us every year. But like I played the original game I think twice, and then I played the remaster before Last of Us Part 2 came out. Um and then I played through The Last of Us Part 2 twice before the game even came out. Which is like a long ass game too. So I've had a huge fill of The Last of Us. I played the multiplayer. I've read the comic. I played the DLC. Like I obsessed over it mostly and just screamed it from the rooftops at people. This version is essentially, think of it as like a shot for shot remake of a movie. So they've
So Gus Van Sant's Psycho.
sort of, but better than that, I guess. But I think you make a good point as like an anchor point for movie fans of being like, is this necessary? Like the original game exists. It's a very good video game. Do you need to play this? And I think flat out, just to get 8 minutes in of what I feel, um, I I think that varies on, how much money you want to spend, mostly. And like, no one is forcing you to buy this. I think it is perfect for people who have never played The Last of Us, obviously, and have somehow missed it over the last 9 years. And I think it is totally worth the $70 American or $90 Canadian that it'll be. Video games are expensive, especially in Canada now. Um, I think if you have played The Last of Us, I could see you going, I don't know if I need to spend that money to play the exact same game again. Is it absolutely stunningly gorgeous on PS5 because every character model has been redone? All the, like, basically every ounce of the game has been redone for PlayStation 5. So it is a gorgeous video game. The animations have been redone. It's so much more realistic looking. Like, the gameplay is more modern. It still very much feels like the first Last of Us and not completely like The Last of Us Part 2. A lot of the gore animations and AI from some of the, bad guys have obviously been improved and reminds me more like Last of Us Part 2. But I think straight up, like, I don't think if you played that first game and you're on the fence of going, I don't know, do I need to play this? I don't think you need to play this if you've already played The Last of Us. I think if you're a huge fan, um, I have been having a great time with it. I'm about 10 to 12 hours in, so this is a review in progress. Um, I got the game on the weekend. The embargo's coming up, so I wanted to get something out. And I have played the game before, so it's not like I don't know it's a great video game. Um, But yeah, I don't know. Like, if you've already played the game, like, is improved graphics and gameplay that is better, worth that very hefty price when the original game is there and you can either get for very cheap or probably even free? I think if you want to play that original version, you're not necessarily going to have a bad time. I still think it holds up. I think it is a little clunky because it was made 9 years ago. It obviously, when you look at it side by side, you're like, the amazing thing about video games is, like, at the time you go, oh my god, this game is gorgeous. Like, Uncharted is
Like you
gorgeous,
just right now.
The Last of Us is gorgeous, exactly. And then I look back at it 9 years later, when you compare the remake, what it looks like, to what the original looked like, and you're like, that looks like garbage. You're like, and it doesn't look like garbage, but when you just see how much, technology has improved over the last 10 years, how much Naughty Dog has improved, the developers over the last 10 years, that you can see why, especially with the HBO show coming out, why they wanted to do this, right? Last of Us Part 2 was an incredible experience on the PlayStation 4, also very great on the PlayStation 5. They wanted a game, I feel like, that would sync up better to that part 2, especially with the HBO show coming out, where you're going to get so many more eyes on this. You're probably like, video games are a big thing, but they are also still niche, right? Like, they're probably the biggest industry in entertainment when it comes to money making and popularity and stuff like that, but they still feel weirdly like a subculture, where when something's on HBO, yeah, my mom's gonna watch it, you're gonna watch it, Eric, right? And then those people, maybe
Don't
not
tell
you
me
and
what
my
to do.
mom, uh but other people who go, oh, what's this new zombie show or whatever, and it's not really about zombies, but like, then they go, oh shit, it's based on a video game that people say is great, I want to go play that. So I understand why Naughty Dog goes, well, maybe we don't, like, the game 9 years ago is great, and I think it still exists if you want to go play it. Like, they're not taking it away from you. They're not ripping it from the digital stores, from my knowledge, or anything like that. If you own a physical copy, you'll always be able to play that game.
It's not like
Um,
the original Star Wars films where
where the
Lucas went out
original
of his
version, yeah,
way to kind of completely make it
where this is the
obsolete.
only version you can play. Like, that's
Yeah.
not going to be the case. It's just another option for people to play, especially new players and diehards. I feel like if you're sort of on the fence, then you don't need to spend the $90 Canadian or the $70 American to play this game. But again, if you're new, or you're going to watch the HBO show and you're interested to kind of completing that story earlier than what the show will give you, I think it's totally worth your time. Like, I do. There are times where I just pause the screen, or I'm playing and I'm so engrossed in it, I'm like, god damn, this is a gorgeous video game, and it just makes everything more impactful. I feel like, I still cried at the opening of this game. All the character beats, just seeing, the wrinkles in people's faces and them like emoting, you get what the original performances intended, and they don't have that weird uncanny valley video gamey thing, where at the time was great, the story was still hugely impactful, obviously. But I just feel like it does add another layer to this that makes it, again, more modern, fits with that second game better, and I think is totally worth your time if you don't mind investing that money. I think that's the big conversation people are going to keep coming back to, is like, well, it's the same game and you're charging full price for it, and I think people don't love that. But again, no one's forcing you to play this. If you don't want to play it, don't play it. Like, just go play the original. But it's there for people who do, and I feel like the additions that they've made, not only, from a graphical side, you also have um different modes. The accessibility options, I think, are a huge reason of why this should exist. Like, Naughty Dog with Last of Us Part 2 had the most in-depth accessibility options I've seen in a mainstream video game, where they just go, well, we want anyone to be able to play our game, or as close to anyone as possible. So you can go in and customize every aspect of the game, to make it uh, uh, to make it playable for you, whether that's making moments skippable, or whether it's changing colors so you can see them better, just making everything be red and blue, or different things being smaller or bigger, or guide you in the right direction. It even has like voice directions and stuff like that. And it's just wild the amount of accessibility options that are in the game. Not necessarily something I'm using, um, but I think makes it worthwhile for this game to exist. Um, I am noticing subtle differences in, like, I don't know if it's just because it looks so much different now and looks so beautiful now that I'm going, is this exactly how this scene played out? Or did they add something, whether it's like a music cue or subtle direction changes and things like that? Like, it's interesting because I didn't play The Last of Us original game right before I played this. It's been a few years, um, where I'm like, oh, that felt like it was completely different. All the big moments happened in the exact same way, and the line deliveries are very. It's using the same performances, and it's not like Dragon Ball Z Kai where they came in and redid all the animations and the voice acting and stuff like that. It is the original performances, just with much better animation and graphics. Um, but I don't know if it's just my head playing tricks with me of going like, oh, was that exactly how that played out? Or am I just, because this looks so good that I think it's a completely new addition to it? So those moments are happening, which even me as a diehard, I think I find refreshing. And that might just be because it looks so great. And then they added in a lot of the stuff from The Last of Us Part 2, where it's like, your chapters and where you are in the story, and you can go replay some missions very easily and see what collectibles you missed. You can kind of go through and any confrontation you've had throughout the game, you can replay that. So they've added all this stuff that makes it feel like a much more modern game, and fits like it is one thing with The Last of Us Part 2. Like, I feel like, and it'll also, I'm assuming, retcon a couple things that they sort of retconned in The Last of Us Part 2, where a character looked like a generic doctor but was a specific character in the Last of Us Part 2, right? So like, it will be that character model now from Part 2 in this version of the game. And I think things like that is like that kind of George Lucasy sort of insert this in there now just to make it make sense. But
The McClunky of it all.
yeah, which is, I don't know. I don't mind that. And again, that original version is there if you want to go play it. So yeah, I mean, they added a speed run mode, which to me, this isn't a game that I necessarily want to speed run or even want to watch others speed run. Eric, do you know what speed running is? It's just
I
like,
have no idea.
it's trying to beat a video game or a section of a game as quickly as you possibly can. And I think because of some of the gun mechanics and the sneaking around trying to kill the clickers and the different enemies in the game, I feel like that's where that speedrun element comes into. It's not maybe the more traditional speedrun I'm thinking of like, they try to glitch a game to get to the ending as quickly as possible to say you could beat the game in 10 minutes if you do this weird thing where you go through a wall and jump down to the end level or whatever. Where I feel like it's going to be mostly like, how quickly can I get through this section of the game? Because there are a lot of stealth moments um, and different things where you can easily get overwhelmed by enemies, or just are very kind of difficult to get through based on the difficulty setting. They also have things like permadeath that they added in, and which are all from the second game, where it's like, if you want to be insane, you go through the game and you have one life, and if you die, it's erased. You have to start from the beginning. And you can go based on chapter based or section based or the entire game. And I've always wanted to do that because I feel like it would add so much more tension to the game and would make you play in a completely different way. Because I'm more of the, I'm just going to shoot everything kind of player, where like, I'm a chaotic game style where if there's a group of enemies, like, I'll just let them know where I am by shooting a dude in the face and then take everyone out, rather than more of the stealth gameplay. And I've tried to mix it up a little bit, where you try to choke out up some of the human characters and sneak around and kill some of the clickers, and I'll just call them zombies. They're not zombies, but that's easier for everyone. They don't like when you call them zombies, but anyways, the story is still fantastic. It is a great video game. I think it's a great remake, but I do think, Eric, you made a great point about the Psycho shot for shot remake, where I don't necessarily think Gus Van Sant's Psycho is a bad movie, because
Well, it
it's
was more of
just
an
this,
experiment, right?
yeah.
Where this seems
And
more deliberate, right? Is this something that is common with video games that are successful the way that The Last of Us is, where it's like, okay, it's sold well for over a number of
yeah,
years, to maybe keep interest going, we'll do an updated version, almost like a software update in a weird way.
you're absolutely nailing it, Eric, and you don't even know. Like, there's two different things: remastered and remakes, right?
Yeah.
So I already mentioned Last of Us already got a remaster right after it came out because of PS4. They wanted to put it out there. It still looked better than the PS3 version. And then when they call something a video game remake, is it can be completely different from that original game, but has the same story, or might be something like The Last of Us, where it's more of a shot for shot almost, but then updates the gameplay to make it more modern. And you see a lot of that in video games, where it's not necessarily like, that's a whole other can of worms of if people are okay with that. But again, no one is ever forcing you to purchase any of these things, and because people buy them is why they keep getting made, right? Like, people, for some reason, it's partly that nostalgia thing, a game that I really liked, and now I can play it how you remember it was, right? Like, that's all this is. It's like, oh, I remembered it like this, and now I get to experience that in 2022 or whatever, and how it would look like now. And um I'm fine with it, and I don't play a ton of them, but like, people want Metal Gear Solid to get a remake, right? Because that is a game that is still fantastic and has fantastic themes and ideas, but it is a bit dated because it came out on the PlayStation 1, right? Like, it's just, if you could have that amazing story that Kojima put in all of his Metal Gear games, and then build that to be almost photorealistic in PlayStation 5. Like, we're getting that close, where the character models in Last of Us, like part 1, like, they look phenomenal. And you
Better
still
than
can tell.
DH Catherine Keener.
Yes, really. And like, you can still tell that it's a video game, don't get me wrong. And like, depending on what setting you play on, you either get a higher frame rate or you get more 4K graphics. And I played a lot of the game in performance mode, which is like 60 frames per second upscaled 4K. And then I switched it to the full 4K mode, which goes 40 frames per second or 40 hertz. And I almost liked it more because we're more film guys, where the game has this film grain on it the whole time. Like a digital film grain that it puts onto it to give it some texture, which you can turn off, but I love it. And I loved the 4K mode because the fidelity, I think it's called fidelity mode. I feel like I'm just reading the PR thing, but it's I loved it because I kind of like that more framey look, because movies are in 24 frames per second, right? So when it's in 40 frames, and I kind of notice that light kind of flicker that you get from even 24 frames, it makes it feel more filmic to me. And this game is also coming out on PC eventually, and I love on you can play in ultra wide on PCs. Like, obviously you can't do that on PlayStation 5 right now, but like, that's my ideal thing. You know how much I love 239 ultra wide widescreen kind of thing, and like, this game in that, oh, I'm like, oh, I might have to like play it on PC again just for that. So it is a beautiful game. I'm remembering it like beat for beat, other than those slight things where I'm like, has that been changed? And I feel like, they did kind of remake the game from the ground up, but I feel like it is more so using the same animations and the same shot composition and everything like that. And then that's why ultimately I feel like it does still feel like an older game than part 2, right? Like, even though they updated the game mechanics and made it feel more modern, like, Joel still plays different than Ellie. And Ellie in the second game, it incorporates a lot of I feel like even more modern feeling gameplay mechanics, whether it's sneaking around or running through things and hiding under cars and how the AI works and things like that. So I still feel like it does very much feel like a remake, um, rather than a completely new game. Like it, even though everything is built from the ground up, it still feels like Last of Us, which I think is both a very good thing, but to some people might be like, well, I've already played The Last of Us, so like I don't know if I need that. And that's totally fair. But I would have paid the money for this game and I wouldn't have been disappointed. But I am a huge Last of Us fan, um and I would, just having this game in how great it looks is worth it for me, and then feeling a bit modern where it doesn't feel as clunky, because even going from the Uncharted games, which are also made by Naughty Dog, to The Last of Us, I remember playing The Last of Us for the first time and going, ooh, oh no, I don't love how Joel feels. He doesn't feel like Nathan Drake. um but Joel isn't supposed to feel like Nathan Drake, and Joel isn't supposed to feel like Ellie does, right? Like he's older. He's like in his 50s in the game, right? Like it jumps ahead 20 years after the outbreak happens. Um so he's supposed to feel like that, and he can't jump around and slide through things like Ellie can, and stuff like that. So that's all still there. But anyways, from a storytelling standpoint, like I still think it's one of the best stories uh in video game history. It's one of my favorite just stories in general. And if you have not played it before, I think it is the perfect reason to do so. And I think it's totally worth the money. If you want to save the money and play the original, I'd say, or just wait for this to go down in price a little bit. Like it's probably going to go down within by Christmas, like, which is a couple months. So like if you, or by the time the HBO show comes out, they're probably going to drop the price then to even hit those people up. I think it might be worth that, but I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Like for a guy who's played this game at least 3 times already, I'm itching. Like after we're done recording this, like I am halfway through the game or so. But I might. It's between this and Dragon Ball. What I want to do,
Of
I
course.
should be watching TIFF screeners. But I've wanted to watch Dragon Ball and play The Last of Us again. So that's saying something. So yeah, I've really enjoyed the hell out of it. So um I'm actually almost done because it's like a 15-hour game and I've about 10 hours in, so I could probably beat it in the next day or so. But um that's my thoughts on the game. I do think it is worth it personally, but that's a personal decision. So if you feel kind of like how I feel, yeah, 70 to 90 bucks is worth it for this remake. But I totally understand someone would be like, well, I've already played it. I don't necessarily need to do that. The other question I wanted to go, and is a conversation now we can segue, Eric. We can kind of segue into the conversation about the HBO show. So there was, I'm not going to give the game a score too, just because like it's a 5 out of 5 game. Um, I'm not done this version yet, so I don't think that that's fair. Um, but I do think that you should play it. The Last of Us on HBO. So there's two different things here. There's the teaser that came out. You are a Last of Us virgin, so you will be going into the show uh fresh and raw.
Just the
I
way I like it. That was
just the way
that's
the
my high
clickers
school name.
just the way the
Fresh and
clickers
raw.
like it. Um I will be going in obviously as a super fan. The other question I wanted to answer was, should you play The Last of Us Part 1 and The Last of Us Part 2 before you watch the HBO show? Um, and that is a trickier question, because I always, being a movie guy and a visual entertainment guy, um, I have this question a lot with books, right? Like people
The
who are huge,
adaptation, right?
yeah, like people who are book dorks always go, the book is better than the movie, or the book is better than the show, or you should read the book. And I always go, if it's a good book, it'll get turned into a movie or a TV show. If it's not, then that's a reason why it never did. And like that is close-minded and stupid, and I'm just kind of being an ass when I say that. But I think the same question kind of applies here, and I would be a little bit of a hypocrite if I said yes, you absolutely should. Um, I think you should take the route of, if you are a gamer or you are open to playing video games, because there is settings where you can turn everything down to like basically story mode, where it's just like you're basically just playing it to get the story. It's very easy, or as easy as they want to make it. But I would say wait until the HBO show and watch that first season. uh if you are obsessed with it or and really love where it's going and you're open to playing the game, the show's not going to be exact. I already know some details based on some character descriptions where it is going to be different, it seems like, and they will make it different, right? Like it's
Well, that's
for
the
the
point of an adaptation,
yeah, it's
right?
still, I'm sure, going to be pretty close to the source material because it is a great story. Um, but recently I did this with Invincible, where I did read the Invincible comic before the show came, but at that time I didn't know an animated version was imminent. Um, when I watched the first season of Invincible, I then went back and reread the rest of Invincible because I was so into it. I was like, I need this story right now. I can't wait 2 years for or a year for the next season. So I think if you're interested in it, I think The Last of Us Part One is a perfect point to go in. And I do think that we're so close to the HBO show where I think maybe wait and then go and play part one after you watch the first season. So that's kind of how I stand on that. Does that make sense, Eric, or no?
Yeah, and I mean, I think like if you're looking at it from broad strokes, from a genre or movie point of view, you know, if you've seen enough dystopian movies or horror films that kind of depict post-apocalyptic worlds, you know, you have a sense of what the story is kind of conveying. Like, you know, you go into this, you kind of maybe aren't familiar with the characters or the overall sort of narrative path that it's setting, but you can kind of get a sense of like, okay, well, you've seen other movies that have depicted, you know, worlds in ruin and civilization trying to survive against, whether it be a supernatural force, whether it be a man-made disaster. And so it's not difficult to understand the you know, the movie literacy of it or the television literacy of it, you know, the narrative literacy. So you know, like everything you're describing to me, like it does sound like, you know, having read some of Cormac McCarthy's stuff, it's feels like it probably was a little bit from that. You know, over the years we've talked about other movies that have kind of taken influence from The
Yeah.
Last of Us, whether it be, you know, It Comes at Night,
At night, yeah.
which, you know, Trey Edward Schultz's film, you mentioned before that like there are certain things with like wearing gas masks and sort of
It
going
even
out
the
on
way that
perimeter.
Joel Edgerton's character is dressed in that movie looks like Joel from The
And his
Last
name
of
is
Us.
Joel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, stuff like that, or even the Maze Runner movies. You know, you've mentioned that in the past as well, where like those films kind of feel like they are kind of borrowing from The Last of Us a little bit in terms of just, you know, some of maybe the, whether it be the creature design, whether it be just kind of like the set decor, or you know, the environments in which the characters find themselves in. You know, and I mean, obviously, like video games have kind of influenced other filmmakers. I mean, like right now, BioShock is being, you know, adapted into a Netflix series, and Gore Verbinski for the longest time was trying to make that into a film, and that fell apart. But what kind of came out of that was a cure for wellness, and you could tell like even in that movie there was a lot of influence of just like the design
Yeah.
and the aquatic kind of creature feature that was kind of going into it, that kind of played a little bit almost like a BioShock adjacent film in a way. That, you know, the way that Gore Verbinski talked very passionately about wanting to make that movie, which is a bummer. But if we had gotten that, maybe we wouldn't have gotten, you know, Dane DeHaan getting his teeth ripped out. So, you
Good
know,
lord, yeah.
silver linings, right? or silver teeth in this case. So yeah, so like it's always just interesting to see like what kind of, you know, how art influences other mediums, whether it be film and television, video games, books, and how it kind of, all seems to go back into one another in some way or another. Like, you can tell that like there is a lot of influences in The Last of Us. That, I mean, you mentioned zombies, and even though, like, people don't like calling, or the creators, I guess, specifically don't like that, but
Yeah, it's
like,
they're the infected, and then there's different like variations of the infected. So there's
yeah,
like runners, stalkers, clickers are the kind of iconic one that you're gonna kind of see, and it's very like fungus. It Super Mario Brothers focused,
well, even
where everyone's
Annihilation,
like,
right?
yes, Annihilation is another thing that kind of takes that look, right? Where
Yeah.
it's very fungal focused, where like basically mushrooms are growing out of their faces, and then there's like bloaters, which are these big bastards, and there's something called the Rat King, Eric. So
Yeah. Well, all that
um
again, it feels like there's a lot there, like, The Walking Dead, obviously, but then
yeah,
George Romero, like
yeah,
with, Night and Dawn of the Dead, which, I mean, in a way, even though this remake of The Last of Us Part 1 is done by um PlayStation, like, it's done by them specifically, like,
yeah.
it's not a fan edit, but like, it's interesting that when Night of the Living Dead was released into the public domain, and it was free to, screen and bootleg and stuff like that, there are so many versions of that movie. There are fan edits, there are editions of that film that you can buy that have, up until even now, that you can buy, that have like scenes where characters will be talking about like how they got to the house that they're all kind of stuck in, and how scenes are like those scenes that they're describing become flashbacks, and fans shot sequences to show you these characters, getting from point A to point B. So it is fascinating that the world we live in, we create something, and then we remix it or re-edit it or reimagine it, whether it be by the people that originally did it, or by somebody that's influenced by it, or whether it's just a fan thing, like, even like just talking about like how Topher Grace, did the
Yeah.
prequels edit on YouTube, and I don't think it's there anymore, but basically taking the best parts of those films and condensing it into one movie. I mean, obviously he didn't redo anything, but like, it's just fascinating that in the video game world, this seems to be more common than it is in the world of film. Like, I think if like the
We
first
get a lot
Toys,
of remakes, but remakes in the film world, I feel like, are very different, where they feel like completely different movies with the same characters for
right?
the most part.
What I'm thinking though is like, if somebody, not even a remake in terms of like redoing it from the very beginning, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about like just like a literal upgrade in the
Yeah.
technology, in the aesthetics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, if somebody did that with Toy Story,
Right. And
I
just
think
made them.
that would be interesting. But as long as the original version is there, unlike the way that George Lucas tried to basically like bury those original Star Wars films,
But
because
isn't
he
that
was
kind of
always a
what the Disney live
perfectionist.
action remakes are? Kind of
They
like,
are, but again, you can still get the original versions
and
of
I think
them,
that's always important, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's important in this case. And there are times where, because everything's so digital now, and video game preservation is a whole separate thing, is that film preservation is a whole separate thing too, of like, if you delete all the digital files to something, unless you have that physical copy and a PS3 or a PS4 to play it on, like, you can't play that original version, right? But like, I'm glad with The Last of Us, it seems like that remaster version is going to be there if you want it. um but this is here too. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing that happens quite often in the video game world. Okay, let's go on to the Last of Us HBO show, because I think this is like a perfect kind of tie-in, this game. I think that's the reason why they're releasing it. I think it's just basically prep and planning for that show to come out. Like, I mean, right before
And to
this
keep
game is coming out,
interest, right? Like to
again, yeah,
keep
this
people
should
excited.
exactly, and keep it in the conversation. We got that with House of the Dragon coming out, which we did talk about on the most recent episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. Go check that out. They did drop like a HBO Max, HBO sizzle reel, where we got our first look at footage for the Last of Us show. So randomly, people have been looking for any details about this show. It was rumored to be pushed to next year. That was confirmed in here. We did get about 10 seconds of footage. You got a shot of Joel running with his daughter. You got Joel talking to Ellie and Pedro Pascal. His Joel voice is spot on. It is perfect. You see Nick Offerman pulling off a gas mask, revealing his look for Bill. You also see so oh my gosh, the actress playing Ellie from Game of Thrones.
Oh, and she's in
The
the new Lena
Last
Dunham
of
movie
Us
too.
HBO. I'm a horrible fan. Bella Ramsey.
Bella Ramsey.
And I know people aren't sold on her because she doesn't look like Ellie, but you know what? That's fine to me. Like we get such a brief little moment of her in this. It's like 10 seconds of footage that I don't think you can judge her based on that. A lot of people we don't see, but you do see Nico Parker as Joel's daughter Sarah, and he's carrying her. That's at the beginning of the show and in the game, like as the outbreak is happening. Um, it was just awesome to see that, you know, just that brief look at footage for that show. And Eric, I mean, you being new to it, it's so little, but did you get anything from that, or
I mean, I'm excited about it in terms of like a genre, another genre.
especially because the who's involved too,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, to me, when I saw Nick Offerman, he just looked like Nick Offerman, but kind of a little bit like his character in Devs, in a way. Speaking of, you know, Annihilation and things like that, but um, yeah, I mean, like I'm very curious. It seems like HBO really is putting the time and effort into making this the best version of this iteration as possible, and want to, you know, make it their next big flagship series, you know, in the same way that they did with Game of Thrones or The Sopranos and things like that, that were very popular, but also critically acclaimed, you know, throughout their run. So, you know, if the time and effort is there, and it's, you know, a lot of it was shot in Vancouver or in
Calgary,
oh, Calgary, BC in general, um,
Alberta.
Alberta. I'll get there eventually. It's late, but out west, in Canada's west, I mean, you know, it's a lot of flat land. It's a lot of kind of, you know, more rural locations that kind of seem to be always of an interest when it comes to shooting anything that has kind of like a hellscape or
Yeah,
post-apocalyptic feel, that's kind of suburban, or not suburban, kind of rural, or anything that has like forest. That
yeah,
always seems to be the place to go. So it'll be interesting to see how maybe they use those locations in interesting ways. So, you know, like, again, I'm excited for it just based on the very small snippet of footage that we've seen. I'm sure it's going to be a big deal, and once they do release a full trailer, or a substantial teaser, I think it will get a lot of people excited, just thinking about, like, oh, this is, you know, a new series with the guy who's on the Mandalorian, and he's doing the Mandalorian and this at the same time. And then genre fans will be like, who haven't played the game, will be like, oh, this is kind of like another zombie-esque story. Like, you know, I'm sure Walking Dead fans maybe have had enough of Walking Dead, and they'll go to
yeah,
this and they'll realize what quality is, hopefully.
yeah.
You know, as much as I like Robert Kirkman's work on Invincible, I think the Walking Dead, you know, after Frank Darabont left, like, just like,
I
okay,
agree.
what's the point
Yeah,
there?
and
Even though I
then yeah,
was really excited about that show, I remember being like, okay, there's never been really a zombie show on television,
and now
and
we've had like 10 years of it, but we're about
yeah,
to get a good one. I promise you. I
yeah,
hope so because like I'm
and the
yeah,
directors too. I just want to
yeah,
say, I think that I think the other thing that excites me the most is that Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin have picked European filmmakers, or, you know, Middle Eastern filmmakers that are not your conventional, like,
TV
studio
directors or
or even,
studio
yeah, like,
or
I mean, I love, like, Tim Van Patten, who's done a lot of work on a lot of different HBO series, is always kind of like one of the go-to guys that shoots a lot of this stuff, and he's amazing. I don't want to take away or the staple of HBO directors that they usually work with, because they know what they're doing. and they've got a style and what have you. But going with the director of Holy Spider, or going with the director of Beanpole or Cuvada Atis, it's like, okay, well, that is going to interest a lot of people that are on the kind of like cinephile side of things, that maybe don't care for video games but loved those movies, but much of which played festivals like Cannes and Toronto and other parts of the world, and be like, oh, this director is directing maybe one or two episodes of this show, and I'll tune in just for that, because I'll be curious to see if any of their signature style translates into this series. And maybe as well, you'll have people that really love the show and the video game do the opposite, where they'll watch one of those episodes, and maybe one will be a highlight, and they'll be like, I gotta see this Beanpole movie. Like, this
That's what I hope,
director,
man. Yeah.
like, did something really interesting here. I'd like to see what he did with his first feature film at the age of 28, and basically made everybody pissed that a 28-year-old can make a movie as
Yeah.
powerful and disturbing, and a film that kind of feels like you have to earn by living in the world, but he did it at such a young age. So yeah, like, it's one of those things where, like, I hope it works part and parcel with that, where, like, the people that are coming to this for the games, or the games, yeah, the both of the games, or just the love of it, will take something away from it and maybe discover these filmmakers, and then the people that are going to it based on those filmmakers will have a deeper appreciation for video games, and not just think of it as, okay, well, we've had so many bad experiences with video game adaptations for films. I mean, joked about Mario Brothers, but it seems like there's been ample opportunity to make something unique or creative, and it always seems to fail. And I can't completely articulate why, other than maybe just like the storytelling is too one-on-one or something like that. But like, you look at everything from Assassin's Creed to Max Payne to, it kind of feels like every opportunity, like, the bar has been set so low that when you praise something like Tomb Raider or even Uncharted to a certain degree, it's like, okay, well, like, they're doing the
The
bare
bar's not high.
minimum.
Yeah.
No, yeah, so
And that's why I fucking hope, man. Like everything I've seen and read about, you mentioned all the directors having the original, creator involved with Neil Druckmann, like working with Craig Mazin. Neil Druckmann's directing an episode. You have that good mix of that kind of, European, like art house cinema and TV directors, because you still have Jeremy Webb and Lisa Johnson and Peter Hoare, who are more TV people. But then you have Ali Abbasi and Kantemir Bagalov and like Jasmila Zibanich, and like you just have this really interesting mix of people, and I feel like they have all the ingredients, right? And from the cast, like Pedro Pascal is killing it, like from the 2 seconds I've heard, where I'm like, that is Joel. His voice is Joel, and I can't wait to see him as Joel. And I'm sure I'm going to feel the same way about Bella Ramsey as Ellie. And I think Nick Offerman is such a great choice. I know he came into the role being recasted, and even in the cast, they have such a good mix of people who were in the video game, either reprising their roles in the show or playing a different character. So you have Jeffrey Pierce, who played Tommy in the game, who's playing a different character named Perry. Trying to think who Perry is in the game. But then you have Merle Dandridge, who played Marlene in the game, playing Marlene in the show, right? And then you have Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, who played Joel and Ellie in the show, saying that they have roles in at least a couple episodes. Like it's not just a cameo,
like Nolan North and
like Nolan
Uncharted.
North, yeah, where they actually have something to do in the show. So it'll be interesting to see who they play. And like, I loved Murray Bartlett in the White Lotus, and his character Frank that he's playing isn't really a character in the game. He's a presence in the game, but you never see that person really. So like that's really interesting to me. Like there's these subtle changes that I even see from the casting that I'm like, "Oh, they're going to show you more. It's not just going to be what you get in the game, right?" Like the game is 15 hours long, but you got to think a lot of that is gameplay, right? Like a lot of that is exploring, a lot of that is fighting the infected, a lot of that is you taking your time through that game, where they definitely have to beef it up. And there'll be action sequences, and I can't the production value looks insane, like you said, Eric. Like a lot of it is traveling across the US, so you're going to have these big wide open
Which is
spaces.
Vancouver, right?
Calgary. Calgary.
BC?
And then but what I've seen of how they actually shut down big sections of Calgary to kind of use those locations like in the city, because a lot of this game is in big cities, but it's all overgrown and overtaken. um and I think there's some really interesting stuff you can do with the fireflies, because in the game the fireflies are basically, the fireflies were this this not militia, but this group that kind of rose up to fight against the government, who was running the quarantine zones and things like that, and we're trying to find a cure. And that's basically the premise of the original game, is that they're trying to find a cure, and the fireflies are this kind of subgroup. And I feel like you can really flesh them out a little bit, because Marlene is a character that really is in a little bit of the beginning and then some of the end of the game. And then the fireflies are not really, like, you just kind of sort of see them here and there. You don't get much from them. You get a lot more kind of backstory and stuff in the second game and stuff. So I don't know how much they're gonna cover. Like, I'm at a part with the characters Henry and Sam, who are cast as Lamar Johnson and Kevin Woodard in the show. So
And you were
they're at
mentioning
least,
today to me that Lamar Johnson's from Brother, the
yep,
coming Virgo movie,
yep, he's in
playing a
that. He's one of
Tiff.
the co-leads in that. And it seems like they even Graham Greene's in the show too, which
Ooh,
is I didn't
sold.
realize. Um and then I believe Brendan Fletcher is cast as Robert, which is an integral character in The Last of Us 2, which is near. I have a feeling, like, I'm not going to say where I think season one will end, but I know a cliffhanger moment from the first game where something happens and then it time jumps not too far in the future, but it time jumps after that. So like there is a moment where something happens that I'm pretty sure that's where they're going to end season one. I don't know if they'll end it exactly on that moment, because I'm trying to figure out. I think that's where they will end it though.
Yeah,
I have a really good feeling I know where they're going to end season one, which is I'm psyched for, because I think is a great cliffhanger. And if I know how TV works, they love a good cliffhanger. So I have a really good feeling where they're going to end season one, based on me even replaying the game, bringing it full circle, like where I am now, and a moment that I know is coming up soon. I think soon after that Robert character I just brought up, where I'm just saying that I'm then very curious of where season two goes, because Last of Us Part Two time jumps again, and Ellie's in her mid to late 20s in The Last of Us Part Two, and there are some flashbacks. But I'm like, do you cast an older Ellie, which they are doing in Game of Thrones right now, right? Like they
yeah.
did cast two actresses as um a younger character, and Olivia Cook playing the older character, right? And they're only like, one's a 19-year-old and one is in their 20s or 30s, right? So like um it's not beyond the realm of possibility that season 2 or season 3, maybe not right away in season 2, um they cast someone else as a older Ellie and then have flashbacks with um this cast. But I don't know, man. I'm psyched. I cannot wait. I have some plans in here for our Last of Us coverage that I want to do. Um, and this just made me excited for the show, which is another reason why they're putting this out here, right? I think it's for fans of this series to get psyched for the show. It's for people who are interested in the show. Because my other theory before we go, um, I'll put this as a time code of Matt's trailer theory. Um, I think we are going to get which other people who know Last of Us. Okay, trailer theory right now. I think The Last of Us Outbreak Day is September 26th, which is like the anniversary of when the outbreak happens kind of in the game and stuff. Um they have to, that's going to be when the full trailer drops. You got to think. Like if this show
Or an
is aiming,
NFT.
no. Because every year on Outbreak Day they make a big deal about, merch and stuff you can buy, and they release different
It's like May
things,
the
and
4th
like
be with you and things like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So with this little teaser dropping during this HBO thing and people going, well, why didn't we get a full trailer? I think they're holding it for Outbreak Day, and that makes sense to be end of September leading into October, spooky season. And this looks like it's going to premiere January or February. It looks like
That
when it
early next
says,
year, you think? Like that you think they wouldn't save that for like I mean, I don't know like I mean, obviously the difference with releasing films versus television is a whole other thing because when it comes to
yeah.
films, when you release a movie at the beginning of a year,
I think
that's
it'll be
not
February, which my birthday, February 8th.
we
Just
get it,
throwing
Matt.
that
You
out
love The
there.
Last of Us. Jeez, okay.
Um,
But when you release a film in the first couple of months of the year, it's usually considered that the
does TV
studio
play
is
by those rules? I
no,
don't
that's
know.
what I'm saying. Like the film studio considers them dumping it, or they just consider it maybe a commercial play because we've gotten stuff recently where like they released Scream in January and it did quite well. But when it comes to television, it seems like if you release something over the summer, it's like that's like the time of year where the studio or the TV people are kind of like, okay, well, we don't really have any faith in this.
I think we'll get it early next year because I think they were aiming for this fall and they pushed it a little bit, like because it seemed like it was going to air this year. And you got to think if House of the Dragon, no series, stop. Um, if House of the Dragon has 10 episodes, we've seen 2 of them. It goes to you got to think it's this Sunday 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. That brings you to like end of October. I don't know what their other big Sunday night show will be for the fall, but I know that not everything is on Sunday nights at HBO, but that's like their big night. So you think Last of Us will take that Sunday night slot? Um, like HBO always has that one thing, it seems like, that keeps you, subscribed, right? Like at least right now it's Game of Thrones.
When's
For
the
us it
White
was a
Lotus
Bear.
season 2 coming? Is that
See, that
January or
seems like more of a
February?
summery show to me, right? Like
Yeah,
going to a resort, but a lot of people go to resorts in the winter, right?
to
So like
escape the cold.
I don't know when season. I loved the White Lotus. You should really watch it,
I
Eric.
gotta watch it. Yeah,
Um,
television's always one of those things where it's like, unless we're reviewing it for the show, unless it really hooks me, or it's Cobra
uh-huh.
Kai, uh, like it's harder to commit than to a film. But I mean, saying that, like we watch movies that are 2 to 3 hours long sometimes, and we'll watch as we are going into the fall festival season, you know, 2 to 5 movies a day sometimes. So, like it's not that big of a stretch. Or like even talking about Dragon Ball Z, like, you know, it's just one of those things where like I find television is more of a commitment. Like even with the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon, like it's just like I want to watch it, but at the same time it's like, okay, well the timing is not great, and it's also like, again, I still kind of feel a little burnt out by Game of Thrones. It wasn't that long ago.
I
So
get that, yeah,
yeah.
but and I'm usually, I've been on more of a TV kick lately, and I think with Nevis, like we like to watch something together at all times, right? So we try to pick something new. The Bear on FX, really good. No, we're getting off topic though, so let's wrap this up. The Last of Us Part One. Um, it's hard to say. I really do think it's worth it. But I am a sucker for The Last of Us, like just having it in updated graphics and things like that. Like I definitely think is worth it, but that's me personally. So and I am so pumped for the HBO show. Like I want a video game thing to be good. Not even good, great. And I have a feeling this has the potential to be great.
The
And I don't
first
want
great video game adaptation.
to get my expectations too high or anything like that, but I have faith in HBO. I have faith in Craig Mazin. I have faith because again, I need to watch Chernobyl, but like
It's
it
good, man.
I know, and like, but everyone else that's involved in it, the directors, the showrunners, like the actors, like it has the budget that they're putting into it, like it has that potential. um and then I want people to see this, and then I want them to go, God damn, that was really fucking good after the first season. And then they go, this is based on a video game? And then they go, they can't afford a PS5 or they can't find a PS5, so they probably can't play The Last of Us Part 1. But if they can find a PS5 or get a PS5, they play The Last of Us Part 1. Then they play The Last of Us Part 2. And I know it's kind of a divisive game because of a whole bunch of different reasons, but it is absolutely incredible. And and like you said, I hope video game fans watch the show and go, God damn, that was a really good episode of TV. Who directed that? And then go see some weird art house European cinema. So
Yeah, and also
everybody wins.
studios maybe look at if it's successful and is critically acclaimed. If it does well, it's like, okay, well, let's look at how The Last of Us did it when we're adapting future video game, movies or TV shows, and use that as a template instead of just
Not everything
completely.
needs to be adapted. That's the thing. Does it
No, no,
already
no,
have a
no.
good story? Then maybe let's focus on what makes it a good story. And
Yeah,
then like,
but it can be done. Like that's the thing where it's like
oh, the
they're really.
floodgates will open, which is a
Yeah,
good and bad thing,
yeah.
right? Like
Maybe
if this
video
is,
games will be the new comic book movies after this.
I don't think so, but it could happen. Like if the Super Mario Brothers movie is also at least a lot of fun, like, and on an illumination level of good, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I feel like with Last of Us and then Mario coming out probably soon after, like I know they're completely polar opposites, but they're both video game adaptations where the original creator is more involved in the creation of it, that I feel like the floodgates could open and you might see more, you might see the Metal Gear Solid movie go into overdrive. You might, see those stuff start to kind of move, or maybe Metal Gear gets turned into a show or something like that.
Well,
But
hasn't Metal Gear kind of been in pre-production now for a little while with
with
Oscar
Jordan,
Isaac?
yeah, and Jordan Voight Roberts, right?
Yeah. Which is
Which,
essentially Escape from New York, right? Like that's Kurt Russell's character, Snake Plissken, in a lot of ways.
yeah, yes and no.
Well, the influence of the
The influence,
character.
oh, and dude, that he wears that on his eye patch for sure.
Yeah,
Like he the character's name in the second Metal Gear, his alias that he uses is literally like
yeah.
is that.
And Escape from New
Um
York, I mean, basically just took like a John Ford movie and basically like Kurt Russell's doing a
isn't
version of
everything a
John Wayne. So
iteration
yeah.
of something, but Kojima is one of those guys that is like Tarantino, where he takes from a bunch of things and makes his own thing, right? But we're getting off topic. Last of Us Part 1, great. Last of Us in general, phenomenal. Can't wait for the show. Uh Maybe wait to play the game after you see the show, or maybe wait for a price drop. But it's really going to be your personal decision. And I know that's why you don't come to reviews for video games. You want to know, should I spend money on this? Um and really it's like, it is very faithful. It is almost a shot for shot remake of that original game. It feels better, it plays better, it looks better. All of these things are true, but it is very much the same story. It's very much the same game. So I think that's a personal choice of if that's worth that money. I think it is. So thank you all for listening or watching. I know this was a little bit of a different thing. We'll experiment with stuff like this from time to time. There are other video game franchises that I would love to review from a cinematic perspective of if the story is worth, jumping in on easy mode if you're not a gamer, or even jumping into play if you are a gamer. So maybe we'll experiment with this a little bit more, but we do have big plans for the Last of Us HBO series. So I'm very excited for that. So keep it locked here on Untitled Movie Podcast and Untitled Movie Reviews on YouTube and podcast services. If you want a one-stop shop for everything, just head over to Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. We post everything over there. So that's probably your easiest spot to find us. We have a new episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast up that you guys should go check out. We talk about Fan Expo, we talk about Dragon Ball, we talk about House of the Dragon, we talk about other HBO shows like The Rehearsal. We don't talk about video games all that much or at
Unless they're
all.
video game adaptations, or I mean,
No, I mean just in that episode. In
Yeah.
general, I talk about video games all the
Yeah.
time, but TIFF's coming up, so our schedule will be weird. You're getting a video game review and conversation right before a film festival, but most of our coverage over the next 2-3 weeks are going to be reviews of films from the Toronto International Film Festival. Your best bet is the podcast version, which will be on podcast services everywhere, just Untitled Movie Reviews. We will be throwing up audio versions on YouTube if you want to get them that way as well. Follow me on all those social medias, social medias. In Vancouver, BC. No,
it's Alberta, man, and Calgary, I believe.
Actually,
I declare it's this.
We've been recording for too long. At Matt Rohrbeck.
I'm Eric Marchin, the moderator of this episode. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Game over, man. Game over.